What up, tech team? What's good? Uh, I have such a heart for the tech team. It's just very like-minded people to me personally. Anyway, so this video is going to cover the entire curriculum for tech team going forward for a very long time. I do not want you to feel like you need to get this stuff all mastered today, tomorrow, next week, next month. I could see this stuff taking a year and longer. So take it in bite-sized pieces. Take the first step, get strong with it. If it takes you 2 months to get gain structures, that's fine. That's good. Gain structures are worth investing in that. These are in order of priority. They are in an order that the first thing is the best thing you can do for yourself. And if that's all you get between now and Christmas, then you've gotten the best thing for yourself between now and then. Take them in bite-sized chunks. The first two topics in the curriculum have already been released. The videos are already out. If you've missed them or you're new to the team or whatever, go back through your emails, search them up. If you're new and you don't have them, ask maybe other tech members like Brian or Debbie to search their emails for all team. Anything that says all team is going to have something in it for everybody, regardless of which part of the worship team they're in, whether they're in the coffee shop or the children's ministry or anywhere. Those things are for everyone. Sound reinforcement is specifically the people mixing. AV will be the slides and the live stream stuff. Um, Music team would be the people playing the instruments on the platform. But your tag there would be sound reinforcement. You want to search up your email for sound reinforcement. You're going to try and find the first two topics that have already been covered, which are gain staging. In the gain staging playlist, you will find two videos, one that is about 7 minutes long, one that's about 30 minutes long. Regardless of which video works at a better pace, there's lots and lots of overlap. I think the 7 minute video covers enough stuff to where if that's all you need and you get it, you're good, then good. I would recommend pausing the video on each visual aid that he puts up. He'll flash up these things really quickly. They got squiggly lines on them. They might not make sense. He doesn't always explain them. They have lots of great content in those as well. But if you get the 7 minute one is your speed and you got it, go ahead. If you feel like you want something a little bit slower, a little bit, more explained out, then the 30-minute video is great for you. There's no harm in doing them both. There's no such thing as too much. It is the first thing for a reason. It is a very important thing to understand. Gain structures, he says it in the video. They prevent clipping, they prevent noise floor. I made the mistake of explaining to somebody at some point to think of gain as like moving the faders region. It kind of does that, but if you are here and you need more volume, you do not use the gain knob. That will mess up your structures everywhere. Instead, you should take all of your, he actually doesn't cover this. So instead of going like, oh man, Jake wants more drums, but he's at the top of his drums, I'm just going to gain him up. You're going to mess up the gain structures. You want the gain structures to be at minus 6 dB. That standard changes over time, but it takes a long time to change over time. In the 80s, it was zero. It was unity was our standard because of tape and the way tapes work. In the early 2000s, it went to minus 18 dB, and then I'd say around 2010, probably minus 12 dB, and now it's around minus 6 dB. And all of those schools of thought are still around, and high-level engineers are using all of them. Minus 6 is what Table Mountain is going to use going forward. It is relevant to our equipment specific, the SQ5. Um, but in any event, and so instead of going, oh man, Jake he's maxed out on his in-ear fader and he wants more, or I need more drums and I'm maxed out here, what you would do is you would take the master volume, whether you're in the left-right stereo mix for the front of house, or if you're in the back of house, AUX 5 or whatever for drums. Either way, there's going to be a master volume on the right for that mix. You bring that mix all the way or up more, and then you will bring everything else down, and that will give you more headroom for that channel. It is more moving of knobs or faders, but it is the correct way to do it. Another thing about gain structures in general is once gain structures are correct, for the most part, your faders should be around that unity spot. Your fade in general, faders shouldn't be like doing these big swoopy things. That means that the gain structures aren't necessarily correct in what's coming into the board. All right, that guy talks about gain structures better than I do, but whatever. Um, So that's not even the first thing. The first thing is to understand locating and labeling channels. I put out a video for that. If you can't find that, reach out because that's already out in the ethos. Gain structures, gain staging is number 2 on the curriculum. Number 3 is mixing. For mixing, there is mostly art. It's a lot of personal choices. We as the music team, I'm going to start taking them through dynamics and understanding dynamics and what that can do for worship. Dynamics is basically a fancy word for saying volumes. We're going to do a lot more than just dynamics, but in terms of how sound reinforcement can support that, I'm getting the team to understand the bottom and to take the floor down in terms of gentle and tender and what we can do there. But we also need to stretch the top, and that's going to affect the desk. Um, for dynamics, um, there is you can get on your phone. You can get an app. I don't actually know what the current best, most consistent app for decibel reading is, but what I would recommend doing is getting 2 or 3. Ask everybody in the booth that day to have the same 2 or 3. Get people to try different ones and look for differences in what dBs you get when your devices are all in the booth or all in the sweet spot of the room, and see if we get like, oh, these 2 apps are consistent, they match up pretty good. That means they're probably accurate, more accurate than the other ones. So we want to pay attention to what our dBs are. Our peaks should be around 84 dB. Um, on full days, well, we'll get to that. All right, so let's come back to dBs and volume. What's the whole point of everything we do? The music team, the tech team, the whole point is to help the people of God engage with him and to enter into his throne room, into his holy of holies, and be soaked in his presence in worship. Volumes affect that. Volumes affect that. You will find a sweet spot where, so we're going to talk about 2 different kinds of volumes here. One is the mix between vocalists and band. You can have Beyonce and everybody else. You can have Gladys Knight and the Pips. You can have like rock and roll, like Tool or somebody, some heavy metal stuff. You can have some like some kind of indie stuff where it's buried in the bands above them, and you will find a place where the vocals sit in the mix, or even the lead vocalist in the choir. You'll find where the people, it gets too much and people stop engaging, and that's more like read the room. Are people, are they engaged? Are they worshiping? Or are they not? You'll find where they're too, the vocals or the lead vocalist are too on top and people stop engaging. You'll find them where they're too buried and people stop engaging. You want to find that range and see what you like in that range. Same thing with overall volume of the whole room. And that's where your dB meter comes in handy. What is all the volume in the room? 84 dBs cannot be exceeded. I apologize. 84 dBs, 120 dBs cannot be exceeded, period. We cannot exceed 120 dBs. You will find that is very difficult to do. You will not enjoy running the board close to 120 dB, but we cannot have a spike exceed 120 dB. 84 dB is kind of like your -6 gain stage structure. It is where your peaks should be. If you peak over 84 dB at 4 times during a service, we're fine. We're good there. If your peaks are exceeding 84 dB 4 times during a song, we're bad, and the master volume needs to come down. But so those are kind of like, that's like a standard for hearing loss, really. So anyway, those are kind of our top, like, I guess, if we were like Billy Graham and we got these huge stacks, then maybe we'll talk about those numbers again. But for Table Mountain, for any church, you're going to find a master volume for the whole, once you find that mix of lead vocalist to choir, and you find vocals to band, and what range works for the room, and where you like it, that's fine. Run it there. As long as it sits in that range where people are engaged. Like I said, if you get those mixes too on top or too buried, people will start to disengage. And so you don't want to be outside of that range, because the engagement's the whole point. But once you find that range, and then you get the master volume to bring everything up or down, you're going to find the same thing. The master volume can cause people to get out of worship, and it can also cause people to get out of worship. There's a medium place in there for where people are engaged, and that's the point. So find that range and then operate it where you like it, so long as it's in those 84 to 120 standards. Mixing is an entirely fluid process. There's absolutely nothing about mixing that is set it and forget it. And that's we'll kind of go through some microcosms there. Um, but what I mean by that is that every time somebody breathes in, their gain structure is different. And so when we are gain staging, we are going to gain stage during rehearsal, during the bit, we're going to gain stage at the top. And when we're asking for a sound check, we're asking them, give me more volume than you're going to give me on Sunday, right? I call this drunk proofing because most of my experience gain staging is for the studio. It's not necessarily, I don't gain stage that much at church for live audio. And in the studio, I work with these singers who they come in and they sing their guts out, and then the day goes on, they start having cocktails, they end up kind of faded, and they go like, and then it's that big scream, that big part, and then they give me more signal than I was prepared for, I was gain structured for, and now I'm clipping and we can't use any of those takes. So even though they're sound checking here, I try and keep it. That's which is why when I came in, I was at minus 18 or minus 12. I don't remember what I was like, hey, we're gonna do it, and then I found out nobody's getting drunk and screaming at church, so we changed it to minus 6 for Table Mountain, which is fine. That's great. But anyway, so we asked them in sound check for their fortissimo, their biggest, loudest thing they're going to give us, and then we gain stage it. Even then, we don't go to unity; we go to minus 6 to give us some headroom there, um, and then I'll check it again during rehearsal when it gets to what a beautiful name, and it's what a powerful name it is, the biggest part of the biggest song, and we check and I'll just quickly cycle through all the gain structures, most specifically on vocals first, and then on the lead instruments. But I'll really quickly go through and make sure our peaks are still coming in around minus 6. That will affect the monitor mix. But it's even gain structure is fluid. You don't want to be changing gain structure all the time. You just want to look for those big spikes. You go, man, and then honestly, realistically, after the checks, after the Thursday night big thing, I mean, we kind of need to navigate some of the stuff together. Like when I do it, do I change it on Sunday morning? Rarely. Maybe there's an exception to that. Maybe you guys can help me find a way to measure that and know that, you know what, it is worth messing up all the monitor mixes on Sunday morning, even late in rehearsal, because late in rehearsals tends to be when the bigger stuff happens. It depends on whether or not it's clipping. But live mixing, the faders, the volumes, right? I mean, and like I said, everything about mixing, even the gain structures change. But the faders should be moving all the time. Every time somebody breathes in, their gain structure is different, their volumes are different, their support is different, it hits their range differently. There's just some voice, like when you go, if you do that, I'm not a great vocalist, but if you do that with even air, your vocal folds will have a spot where they like it. So even though I'm breathing the same, this one's coming out louder, and so that'll affect your mix all the time. So nothing about mixing is static. It is entirely a fluid process. Always asking yourself, what am I hearing? And does this sound like music I would listen to? Those are the two best things you can ask yourself constantly throughout the mix. What am I hearing? Does it sound like music I would listen to? Sometimes all you're hearing is drums. Maybe you got to pull the drums down. Maybe you got to pull everybody else up. More art than science. That's kind of up to you guys. I trust you guys. I have faith in everybody that I've turned the keys over to the board in. So with that, there's also what would be good is an understanding of stereo versus mono. We might do a bigger video on this, but Brian and I were just at a conference where we saw their stacks were all together. This is great for spoken word. It's not great for music. There is a concept in stereo and mono. We'll whatever. I feel like I keep explaining this stuff. I'll release videos with all this stuff, but understanding what is stereo in sound, and then what does the cable look like, how they look so much similar, but they're different cables, but they can look exactly the same, but one has 2 separators and one has 1 separator. And so then one's a stereo cable, one's a mono cable. So watch out for that stuff coming. Again, everything's in order. The stuff that I said before, this is more important than understanding stereo and mono. Miking stuff up. There's so much stuff to the axis that the axis, AXIS, the axis that the mic is on, where the mic is placed, how close to the thing it is, whether or not it gets moved will massively change your gain structure. If the mic gets kicked, you got to go back to check step one, gain structures. Scenes, the SQ5, the desk that we are using is digital and has these amazing, sorry, this is going to jump back to gain structure. In the video, he talks about how analog distortion and clipping can be really cool, and that's how like rock and roll was invented with tube amps, old technology, clipping and being gain structured the wrong way. We are not in that analog world. We're in the digital world very much, in digital clipping. I dislike it very much. I have never heard an example of digital clipping that I wanted to use in any place ever. Live, recorded, on a synth, on a guitar, on a fuzzy guitar, on anything. It's a very harsh sound. In any event, scenes. The SQ5 is capable of doing lots of really cool things. It would be great to understand scenes, saving scenes, recalling scenes. And there are, with that, there are benefits, and there are also pitfalls. Because when you go from one scene to the other, you're changing lots and lots of settings. That comes with its cautions. You want to make sure that you're going into something that is ready or has been checked, basically, right? So anyway, we'll watch for stuff on scenes. If you have questions on scenes, check out. You can if you feel like in this any point in this curriculum, you feel like I know this whole first half, but this next thing he's talking about, I don't know what that is. Search it up. Alan Heath SQ5 scenes. Yeah, anyway. There are holes, there are gaps in our knowledge base, stuff that I've never taught anybody. Brian knows he knows all this stuff actually, but anyway. So if you have any questions, you can go to Brian. In terms of structuring the booth, I'm thinking of having Brian be chief engineer, where he's kind of like, he gets to choose, does the cable run this way or that way? How do we run stuff? Anything there's tons of stuff where you've got a ton of lane. We'll talk about that, the creative control. You have a ton of lane, but there is some stuff that we should all do the same way. I'll defer to his judgment on that. But anyway, the gaps in the knowledge base are the coffee shop. Just turning on the drum amp, setting the volume on it, turning on the TV, getting that computer to send the video to there. Batteries. I'm paranoid about batteries. I think it's an avoidable mistake. You can avoid a lot of hot swaps if your battery game is strong. There's a lot to radio frequencies and RFI and EMI, and that's part of why I rewired the system. A lot of the stuff that doesn't get moved around each week, the cables running in the booth and also the cables running from the desk to the speakers have been run in a way that avoids RFI and EMI, radio frequency interference, and electromagnetic interference to help with our noise floor issues. But batteries are a simple thing we can do week in and week out. I charge them every single time I'm there. Thursday and Sunday, I charge them full up. I make sure what's going into our wireless mics are full charge green batteries. If somebody needs the mic stand batteries, they get lower priority batteries. Basically, Shane's spoken mic gets the best batteries we've got. The first green batteries to come up go in the clip-on Pastor mic, the lav mic. The next ones will go in the handheld, and then if we have to put not full charged batteries. So anyway, I use a system for charging batteries. Hot swaps. A hot swap is Shane's preaching and there's something's cutting in and out. It's like we need to go give him batteries right now. We need to change his mic out for the handheld. We need to try a new cable. We need to do it during service. That's what a hot swap is. We're running, show's running, and we got to swap something out right now. That determination is based, and again, it's more art than science. It's you guys deciding this stuff, and I trust you. The determination is it more disruptive for me to walk up and put batteries in his belt clip, or is it more disruptive to let the dropouts continue? Which is worse? And then just executing from there. Okay, so we're going to take a detour from the curriculum. This is just stuff. These are honestly what these are just like tasks that could be worked on during like lulls or maybe you're at rehearsal and there's nothing going on, or headspaces you can think of, or maybe it's something you're like, I have a great idea for that, or whatever, something you can just go and run with. I'm going into a very big planning center phase between now and Christmas, and then I'll do that again as Easter approaches. But in between, I can work on some of the stuff, whatever's left. But any help I can get on these things would help move us forward. Shane is dissatisfied with his clicker. He it really disrupts his flow state when the clicker doesn't work right. And so if we can find some solution, that might be um, uh, I actually would advise if you have a heart for the clicker thing, and these are also in order of like biggest pain point to lowest. If you have a heart for the clicker thing, probably get with Brian and Nathan and see how you can help them or what can happen there, because they just have more tech. I understand, strings and chords and even cables pretty well, but the video side of AV and the tech side of stuff. I'm a Luddite. I'm not the dude. Um, bass in the live stream. For whatever reason, we're not getting bass into our live stream. And I believe the way I have the board configured, inputs and outputs, is anything you do in front of house will go into the live stream. So it should be intuitive, or we shouldn't have to take a ton of, but whatever. We can get our bass going into the live stream. That might be the case with my electric guitar. I haven't really checked that. There's an app on Android and on iPhone that people can use to mix their own monitors. It requires configuration inside the desk, the SQ5. Um, so that app, basically just Google searches, how to get the SQ4U app working with the Allen Heath SQ5, and then just kind of see if you can set that up for us. Pixels on the TV, that's going to be a cable. If you are able to, it's not that hard actually to run. It doesn't take that much time, but if that's something you could do, reach out. I'll buy the cable, and then we can put that in. Sorry, that's going to be the TV on stage right. As you're looking from the booth to the stage, it's going to be on your left. The other TV was a problem. We replaced the HDMI cable. It fixed it. And I'm guessing it's the same thing on stage right. The other TV and the pixels there. Groups and buses will help you mix easier. You can take all the mics, all the vocal mics, and group them together. And then what you can do is kind of get whoever's mostly singing lead. So maybe like Elena sings lead on the first two songs, and then Mary sings lead on the next one. And so at the top of the song you set Elena a little bit on top of everybody else, and then now the vocals are kind of set like a choir, and you can just move those with one fader. So groups and buses and routing are a thing inside of the SQ5 that I just don't have the knowledge base for. The manual, YouTube, stuff like that can help you. It will make mixing easier. You can set the band to its own kind of group and bus. And again, it's live. You get to where the drums are too hot here. You got to mix that fader, but it's still a group. And so then the rest of the song or the rest of the chorus or the verse or whatever, but it can just make it simpler to make the whole band come up and the whole choir come up and that kind of ratio between the two. So groups and buses, understanding that, and really training others would be sick too. Copy pasta, and SQ5 is able to copy and paste. So one time Jen was like, "Hey, every time Steve plays, my mix changes radically in my in-ears, and I had it pretty good for a while when I was up every week. Is it possible to just save mine?" There is a way to copy paste lots of settings within the SQ5, even within scenes. There's ways to say this is a global parameter. I don't know what terminology to use, but there's a way to say this whole thing we're going to not touch, but we're going to save scenes and make all this other scene stuff changeable. But every time somebody saves a scene, it's going to have certain things just always set that just don't change. There's also ways to take whole channels and go, I want this whole channel in the EQ. I had it all dialed on Elena, and she switched from 15 to 17. I could just copy 15 and paste it on 17, and now 17 is dialed the same way. Guess what? That new input has a different length of cable, which has a different set of capacitance and resistance, and wire itself just has electrical properties. So even if you're using the same mic, the same cable, the same box, and you just moved it from box to box, it can sound different. I tried to overcome that I tried to make all of the wires the same length. I'm a human, I made mistakes, so it's not going to be perfect, but it's a great place to start with all the settings from this one to all the settings to that one, and then finesse it from there. Can save you lots of time and the buttons are there, and it's got to be simple, but I've messed it up every time I've tried it. PC audio, we're getting a lot of noise floor from our PC audio. I believe it is because we are going from a stereo cable into two mono splits. I have roped in stereo to stereo, tip ring sleeve to tip ring sleeve, 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch, respectively. At the computer takes an 1/8 inch like your headphones, and then it goes to 1/4 inch on the board. And I've got the cables there, and I've tried them. But I can't get them to make the problem. Here's the problem we're having. If we listen to music from the computer, to the front of house sound, we're not really hearing left and right. We're hearing one speaker good and the other one's doing weird stuff. And the way you can test that is you go on YouTube, you tell it stereo test, you click play, and it'll show you an image of a speaker on the left. It'll show you an image on the speaker on the right, and you should hear the same thing as it goes back and forth. And you'll see, and it's weird. So I'm not getting both sides of the PC audio in. I'm also getting this noise floor interference. And I've got the wires in there. I just haven't been able to figure out the inputs on the SQ5. I've played with it. I don't get it. I don't know what's going on. So any help there would be valid. Back to curriculum. After those tasks, it would be valid for you to understand our signal path. I'll put together a video on that. If that's your next thing, let me know. I'll release that sooner than what I think it needs to be coming out in. Understanding balanced versus unbalanced cables. That's a YouTube search you can find. I'm sure you can find a video that would explain that really well, what the values in both are. Speaker versus instrument cable. They look identical. They are not the same. Here's a rule. It's important to understand speaker versus instrument cable. You shouldn't ever be plugging in an amplifier. My guitar amp uses speaker cable. The subs to power amps use speaker cables. Those are things that you shouldn't have to touch. In general, if you're plugging in an amplifier, a power amp to anything, you need to use speaker cable. If you use instrument cable, which looks the same on the outside, you can start a fire. So if you're not sure, ask a question. But again, you should never have to mess with amps, but it's good for people to know that stuff. And the fire thing's kind of an extreme example. I haven't seen many fires personally. I've heard of many of them. That was mostly in the 80s when people were running stuff really hot and didn't understand gain structures and stuff. Troubleshooting is difficult. It is not a simple one-off video. It kind of requires all that other stuff, knowledge and all that other stuff, because anywhere in the signal chain it can happen. Anywhere in the SQ5 it can happen. One stupid little setting can cause you to have no sound anywhere. And it's like, where do I find it? But yeah, so that's the very last thing on this video. Again, this is the curriculum that can take years. It can take months. It can take a day for some people. I don't know where you're at and what rate you learn at and how much you already know. But do not feel like you have to have all of those things by Christmas. Take the first thing. Understand labeling and finding the channels. Get good at it. Get to where it's easy. Then add gain structures. Get good at it. Get to where it's easy. Then take longer than you think you need to on one thing. Try searching YouTube. Ask me for resources, whatever. I can make custom videos for each thing. I just don't know where everybody's at and where we're at. But just don't feel overwhelmed by all this pile of stuff. Most of the game, as you've seen, is what you do Sunday in and out. Oh, there's not enough drums. That's most of the game. This is just all the other stuff. I love you guys. I'm very grateful for your support and your hearts. I'm so impressed with this church in general. I can't believe how smooth everything's going. There's almost no infighting. Oh. How did I miss this? I missed a whole thing in mixing. Oh, it's right there too. Okay. So I'm gonna magically insert this to mixing. There is a whole stretch on personal choices. Okay. Mixing is more art than science. You get to choose how much drums, how much bass. You know, some people like metal, some people like jazz, some people like whatever. Each one of those is mixed differently. You might come from one world or another or whatever. You mix it like music you would listen to. With this, you will not see eye to eye on how each other mix. Period. I mix things differently than you do. Okay, compared to how I mix things, which is not the right way, and you guys are the wrong way. That's not how it is. It's art. It's not science. Mixing is not science. Gain structures is science. dB meters is science. But a lot of the other stuff we talked about, like where the vocals sit in the mix, there's a spot where people disengage, there's a spot where people disengage, and there's all this stuff in between. And you get to pick what you like. That's part of the game. The nature of a silent stage and having even the nature of any stage, really, even with the monitors and the wedges, I cannot be on the platform and in the sweet spot telling you what's right and what's wrong. I just can't. I have to trust you, and I do trust you. You will not mix the way each other mix. Compared to me and how I mix, Brian puts Elena and her keys hotter than I would. Too loud. Hermione puts Steve and Mary. Too loud. Debbie puts Heather. Too loud. Am I saying this to ask you to change the way you mix? Not at all. Not for a heartbeat. I would have never said anything because it all falls within that tolerance. None of it is going to pull people out of worship. You love those people. Hermione loves her mom. Of course she wants to hear from mom. Of course that's what she's listening for. Same could be said of every single one of those examples. They all and when I heard them, I'm like, yeah, they're all within that tolerance of people are still going to engage in worship. That's the point. Great. The only reason I bring it up is because I have heard people start to go like, it doesn't sound right to me when it's not their week. That's part of the game. When it's your week, you make it sound right to you. When it's their week, they get to make it sound right to them. Cool? So yeah, that should just get surgically put in. Hopefully I actually do that. Love you guys. Talk to you soon. Bye.